Lecture 8, Myth and Athenian Drama.
To the Greeks of the 5th century BC, the classical age of Greece, the golden age of Greece, these stories of the Trojan War, of Jason and the Argonauts, of Theseus and the Minotaur, they were regarded as real history. But they also were regarded as moral truths, as stories which conveyed more profound values, more profound ideals. In fact, mythology must be studied closely alongside Greek and Roman religion. The Romans simply adopted the mythology of the Greeks, and in the 2nd century AD, in the heyday of the Roman Empire, this mythology served as the moral statement of the values of Greco-Roman religion, as fundamental to them as theology is to Christianity. And mythology was their theology, their knowledge of the gods. Nowhere was this more true, the use of mythology to convey moral values, than in the first democracy in history, Athens of the 5th century BC. In Athens of the 5th century BC, following the titanic victory over the Persians, Athens and Sparta are uniting to lead the Greeks to drive away this threat to their freedom. After 480 BC, the Athenian democracy flourished. The Athenians ruled over an empire of 253 Greek cities, all the way across the Black Sea into the Crimea of Ukraine today, the islands of the Aegean Sea, the coast of Asia Minor. All of these Greek cities were part of the empire of Athens. Like Minos before them, the Athenians ruled a thalassocracy, an empire of the sea. It was a true democracy in which every citizen participated. It was the first government based upon the ideal of the greatest good for the greatest number of citizens. It believed that every citizen had the responsibility, the duty, to participate fully in government. Every decision was made by the assembly of all Athenian citizens, all Athenians over the age of 20 and male, because to be an Athenian was also to serve in the Athenian military. Athens had a citizen militia, and because women did not serve in the military, they were not citizens. They were passive citizens. They had the protection of the laws of Athens, but did not vote. Now, this was an awesome responsibility. And the Athenians educated themselves for this awesome responsibility of self-government. The Athenians insisted that every Athenian parent send his children to school to get a compulsory education, but they also continued education through one of the most remarkable cultural institutions in history, the Athenian drama, the tragedies of Athens and the comedies. The Athenian tragedy is the characteristic cultural statement of the Athenian democracy. The most dramatic plays, the most creative plays, the most creative playwrights are absolutely coterminous with the heyday of the Athenian democracy. Beginning shortly after the victory over the Persians in 480 and coming to an end, clearly and closely, dramatically we might say, in 404 BC, when the Athenians met total defeat at the hands of the Spartans. And the drama at ancient Athens was not like something that might appear on PBS, watched by a few people. It was civic duty to attend. You received a day's pay in order to enable you to attend. Women were not allowed in the audience. And in the plays, the Athenians considered, evolved in their minds, the moral values by which they must govern this empire. because the Athenians and Greeks as a whole believed that however scandalous some of the behavior of their gods might be, the gods demanded righteousness and justice. The gods demanded absolute right and absolute wrong. And to do wrong would ultimately be punished. And the greatest of all wrongs was hubris, that outrageous arrogance in which the innocent people are trampled upon by the powerful, or in which a powerful individual believes himself or herself so powerful that they can do anything they want. Excess, nothing in excess, that was the fundamental value that the Athenian drama taught. Even good things, when pushed to the farthest limits, can become destructive. We are most fortunate in having a definition of the Athenian drama from the most profound mind of the Greek world, Aristotle, who died in 322. He watched carefully the Athenian dramas. The great playwrights, Euripides, Aeschylus, and Sophocles, all belonged to the century before him. Their plays were put on again and again in his own day. Aristotle defined a tragedy as the imitation of an action, complete and noble, performed, not narrated, with beautiful music, noble language, with riveting stage effects. And the purpose is to arouse in the audience the feelings of fear and pity, and thereby achieve a catharsis of those feelings of fear and pity. It is the imitation of an action. You don't actually see Oedipus gouge his eyes out. No one really gouges their eyes out, but it is an imitation of that action. And that action must be complete and noble. These plays were supposed to have their narrative encompass only one day, from morning to night. And it must be noble. You must see the end of the play, and the play must deal with noble characters, with only one exception. A play written to celebrate Athens' victory over the Persians. All the plays that have come down to us from Euripides, Sophocles, and Aeschylus deal with the heroic past, the age of the Trojan War, or the generation before, like Jason. One, it was to show that these moral issues are eternal. Each generation must deal with these questions of the moral dimension of power. At the same time, it was meant to show that tragedy only happens to those who are truly powerful and great. If I were to walk out of the studio tonight and be run over by a truck, some people might care, it might be a little sad, but there's nothing tragic about it. But if an Oedipus, if a Theseus can get into such dire trouble with all their wisdom and power, how much more likely is it to happen to you as an individual or to Athens as a people? So they deal with the heroic past and the moral values taught by these mythological stories. The language must be noble, and the poetry of an Aeschylus or a Sophocles would resound upon your ears the way the King James Bible does today. You could understand it, you could grasp it, but you had to listen hard. And all of these plays were operas. They were sung. And that's why when we approach them today through a prose translation, we can at best get only a synopsis of the story. So beautiful music. And you know from watching movies how much music adds to the drama. And they should arouse in the audience the feelings of fear and pity. Aristotle is quite specific on that. and thereby achieve a catharsis, a purging, as if you had eaten too many prunes, to purge your body. Why fear and pity? Because those are the two most dangerous sentiments to hold when you are making a decision. And if the Athenian assembly is deciding a matter of war or peace, if it is deciding how to treat a nation that has revolted against its power, it must not have fear and it must not have pity. Never make a decision when you are afraid, and never make a decision feeling sorry for someone. So these were stern moral lessons that were conveyed. And to Aristotle, the most perfect of all these dramas was the Oedipus the king, or Oedipus Tyrannus, Oedipus the tyrant, as it appears in Greek, by Sophocles, produced in the year 429, when Athens was at the height of its power, and under the leadership of its democratic statesman Pericles, one of the three great democratic statesmen in history, along with Abraham Lincoln and Winston Churchill, Athens had gone to war. Once again, a preemptive war. Pericles convinced the Athenians that Sparta was going to attack them, so the Athenians and their coalition went to war against Sparta and its coalition. Sophocles had never trusted Pericles. He thought Pericles was the very exemplar of a man who thought he was wise when he was not wise, who was so sure he was right that he would lead his nation into this war. Oedipus was real history. Homer refers to Oedipus. In Homer, Oedipus is that man who married his mother. She hanged herself, but he continued to rule. And Thebes, the scene of all of this tragedy, was one of the cities of Mycenae, one of the citadels of Mycenae during the Trojan War. So Oedipus, to the Athenian audience of 429, was a real human being. A tyrant, but a tyrant because he was the wisest man in his city. And when the play begins, he announces, "I am world-famous Oedipus." Of course, by the time the action is complete, by the end of the day, he is world-famous Oedipus as the greatest of sinners, the man who has murdered his father and wed his own mother. And to the Athenian audience, it raised the question, what is fate? Do we have free will? Or is everything fated for us by the gods? And in this question, did we have a choice about going to war with Sparta? Or was this something that fate had determined upon and we must see it through to the end? And Sophocles, the playwright himself, all playwrights were Athenian citizens. Sophocles had served his country nobly at the Battle of Salamis. He had frequently served on the crucial committees. He was looked upon as a very wise political figure. Sophocles himself was not sure at this point about whether we are fated or whether we have free will. Could Oedipus have avoided all of this? Could he have avoided it by, when the oracle had said, "You will kill your father," by engaging in acts of road rage against a man old enough to be his father? Or when he got to Thebes, should he have married a woman old enough to be his mother? Was it fate or was it free will? Did Oedipus have a choice? And all through his long life, Sophocles continued to ponder this question and to ponder Oedipus, what his story meant. And by the time he had reached the last years of his long life, he was more than 90, he had seen Athens fall. Pericles had died in the plague of 429, a plague that resonates in Oedipus the king itself. And Athens had gone on to total defeat at the hands of Sparta. Its empire had been stripped away, and Athens was forced to surrender unconditionally. What did this mean? Sophocles asked himself. And in his last year, he once more composed and had performed the last of his plays about Oedipus, Oedipus at Colonus. It is about Oedipus, and it is about Theseus, and it is about what the true values of Athens really are. In this play, Oedipus has been wandering the world for years. He had gouged his eyes out, and then finally, when he had grown accustomed to living there in Thebes by himself, he had been thrust out of the city by Creon, his brother-in-law, and by his own sons, and forced to wander all over Greece, led by his daughter Antigone. Everywhere they go, they are driven away. He's a pariah. He is the greatest of sinners. Can you think of something worse than killing your father, marrying your mother, and siring children by her? And so they come into a grove, and he turns to his daughter, who's leading him by the hand. He's in rags, badly shriveled and shrunk. And he asks his daughter, "I'm so tired. Where are we now?" "I don't know, Father, but I think we must be in Athens. From the way the people speak, those magnificent buildings I see there, rising high above us, in Athens." "I must sit down, child. Here, Father, come with me. Let me lead you over to this stone." And there he is seated. "I'll go and see if I can find some water for you, Father. Maybe even a little bit for us to eat. I'm such a burden on you, child. I'm so sorry. Never mind, Father. It is what I want to do." Then a group of Athenians come up to him, and they say, "Do you know where you are? You are at the sacred grove of Colonus." Colonus was a local Athenian hero, worshipped as a god. "You can't sit there. That's sacred ground." "I'm so tired." "Well, you just get up out of there and come out." "Wait a minute. Why are you blind?" "It doesn't matter. I'm blind." "Looks like you gouged out your own eyes." "And it doesn't matter." "What's this girl? Who are you, girl? What's your name?" "Antigone." "Antigone? That's the daughter of," "Oh yeah, Oedipus." "Oh, you get out of here right now, old man. We don't want you polluting our land, polluting our shrine. You get out of here." "No, I will not leave. You have a king, Theseus. He is known all over Greece for his justice, his kindness. I will abide by whatever decision he gives me. You go and send for Theseus." "Well, this is a pretty big decision." "All right, we'll go and send for Theseus. But let us ask you in the meantime a question. Did you really kill your own father?" "Yes, but I didn't know he was my father." "But you killed your father." "I didn't know he was a father." "You're a terrible sinner. Parricide is just about the worst sin you can encounter." "But if I didn't know I was sinning, how could I sin? I thought it was self-defense. He came upon me with an entourage. They demanded I get out of the way, and they struck me, and I struck back." "Yeah, but you also, you married your mother." "I didn't know she was my mother." "It's still, marrying your mother, that's incest. That's as bad as parricide." "I didn't know she was my mother. How can I sin if I didn't know I was sinning? And it wasn't my choice. The gods had laid down from the beginning of time. I learned through the oracle that I would marry my mother and kill my father. That is why I ran away from Corinth. I thought that's where I had been born. My parents told me they were my natural parents. They didn't want me to know I was adopted. So I ran away. I did my best to avoid this terrible crime. But the gods had determined that I would do these acts. This poses a really interesting question. But let me ask you something. What, Oedipus? You say that I am polluting this holy ground. Yes, you are. That's right. You ought to get out of there. Is there any way that I can cleanse myself here so I can stay in this grove? For it has been foretold that wherever I die, that city will be forever invincible. Well, sure. What you need to do is you will walk into the grove further. You'll see a spring. There'll be 3 little wooden bowls. Pour out fill them up with water. Pour out 2 of them fully and keep 1/2 of one. I see. And then, well, you'll find some little pieces of wool. Put those around the cups. And then adorn them with leaves from the laurel tree. And then back out of that holy spring. I will do it. And so he does it. This is the man who in his mid-years had known everything, questioned every value, doubted that the gods cared about right and wrong, scoffed at traditional religion, just the way Pericles had done. And now he's learned. He doesn't ask why. He simply does what the ancient ritual tells him. Then comes Theseus, tall and strong and handsome. I know who you are, he says to Oedipus. It has been foretold to me that you would come. Will you come home with me to my palace? Stay with me for as long as you wish. Be my guest. You would take me into your home? Don't you think I'm a sinner? I don't judge any man. I see only before me a man who has suffered greatly, and I can help you suffer no more. I can bring an end to your suffering. Come with me. Oh, I am so honored, so touched, but I believe the gods want me to stay here, in this grove. Did you know that it has been foretold that if I die in a place, it will never be conquered? I did not know that, and that has nothing to do with my desire to help you. At this moment, his old brother-in-law Creon shows up with the sons of Oedipus, and they try to drag him back to Thebes in order to secure their invincibility. And Theseus fights a battle and drives them out, just to protect old Oedipus. And there Oedipus stays, and Theseus stays with him as the day begins to grow to a close. Now remember, that morning he had been the greatest sinner in the world. By afternoon he has been protected by Theseus. And as the evening begins to come on, Oedipus turns to his daughter and King Theseus and says, I am about to die. And Theseus says to Antigone, you may not go further into the grove. I will go with your father. And taking the old man by the hand, he leads him further into the grove. And there's a clap of thunder. Theseus returns alone. What happened to Oedipus? I do not know. He is simply gone. It is a miracle, and we will forever, here in this grove, worship Oedipus as a god. He has achieved this divinity by all the suffering that he went through. And we can learn from the suffering that he brought upon himself not to think we are wise when we are not wise, not to question the rituals of the gods, and to believe always that righteousness will prevail. Now, these tragedies were also a religious ceremony. They were put on in the spring of the year, late March, early April, that very time when the earth is coming alive again. And they are put on in honor of the god Dionysus. Dionysus is, of course, the god of wine. And wine is a very good statement of nothing in excess. You take a little bit of wine, as St. Paul says, for your stomach's sake. I thought it was a liter. Mrs. Fears tells me it's only a glass. But whatever, a little bit of wine is good for you, but you drink too much, well, you go crazy. So Dionysus is the god in honor of whom these tragedies are put on, and they are a religious ceremony. There's an altar there in the chorus, the theater. And Dionysus' very name means the Son of God. Dionysus was the son of God, the son of Zeus, by a human woman. And Hera was so jealous of this adultery that she had the little child torn to pieces. Zeus carefully put him back together and hid him in the thigh of his leg, stitched him up inside until he could be safe from Hera. In other words, this is the Son of God, and Zeus actually is the same word as the Latin Deus and just means God. He is the Son of God by a human woman who suffers and dies and is brought back to life by his Father. Among the most profound of all Athenian religious ceremonies occurred each year at this time of the year when the Athenians went out to the sacred shrine of Eleusis. There they offered up sacrifices to the goddess Demeter, the goddess of fertility, her daughter Persephone. Remember, who had been snatched away by the god of Hades and finally had to spend 6 months in Hades, but 6 months each year resurrected, brought back to life. And joined with Persephone and Demeter was Dionysus. And the Athenians were initiated into this cult of Eleusis. They partake of a meal in which they eat the body and the blood of Dionysus. They partake of wine. And if you've ever seen a vineyard in the winter, it looks dead. How can it ever come back? But it does in the spring. And then in the fall, it brings forth its fruit. But you must crush that fruit underneath your feet. So the Greeks said. And that is the blood of that grape that gives you that transforming elixir of wine. So suffering must come to us all. But if we live righteously, if we learn from the examples of those who have failed, then we can be resurrected. Oedipus is a vicarious sacrifice. As Aristotle tells you, you witness what happened to him and you feel fear and pity. The fear that something terrible like that could happen to you. And as we go through life, we can see how horror falls upon horror in an individual life, just as it fell upon Oedipus that day. And we feel pity for him. And then, if we're wise enough, we can learn vicariously. We don't have to fail the way Oedipus did. We can gain wisdom. Nothing in excess. That is one of the most profound moral lessons you will ever learn. Do not question the gods. The fear of the gods is the beginning of wisdom. And let us, as a superpower, so said the Athenians, guide our destinies so that we fight for what is right, overcome evil, and lead with justice, both as a nation and in our individual lives.